It's so hot and dry and breezy out that I probably don't need to worry much about any kind of cleanliness, but I will go ahead and with some alcohol, why not? I mean, I'm not even going to use a clean surface. And some of these have no horizontal cuts. That was just part of the experiment. So we'll cut those into what seem like reasonable sections. Again, that's usually going to be 2 aerials, it would look like. We need to label all of these, every single one of them. So from that big experiment, I know I gave one of these cuts away. Unless this is, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. That would be one more than this. Let's go ahead and count these just to see what we're getting out of that whole big piece we cut up in the original first video there, or the second video, whichever it was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 36 or 7, 38. So 38 out of, you know, hopefully we'll have 38 decent sized plants with roots by this time, or by, well, it may be more like October, you know, late September, October. That's the goal. I'm writing on them in the right direction so I know which direction is up, because sometimes as things shrink and stuff, it gets harder to tell what's up and down. And even if I could figure it out, it's just going to take more time, and this way I know exactly which way to stick them. Just hang this up here, get lots of air circulation there. I'll be using the very efficient Anderson band system. It consists of these graded flats like this with the holes in the bottom. This is a root pruning system. So the pots I'm going to use for these chips at first is this size. They might be a little small, but I'm just going to try them out and see how it goes. The only real concern is that, like, once these start to grow up and they're all pupping and the pups get, like, you know, 6 inches tall, they may just be too crowded, but it may not, so we'll find out. So these have like an open bottom. It's kind of like a cross. The way this works is that since it's square, the roots don't tend to circle and they grow down, trying to grow out the bottom, and then they grow into the air and die. So it just they keep trying to do that, and they fill the pot out nicely with roots without just circling and getting super root bound. Add soil, and I'll add soil all the way to the top. Then I do that. Get it nice and compressed, make sure it's full. And you can see this is pretty tight here, but you can pack the whole thing with these, and it's very tight. So if you're working on a large scale, you could fill this thing with empty pots and literally shovel, you know, potting mix onto it, smooth it off the top, and then like press them down. And just some other pots that may work. If these don't work, I think this is the next size up, but it comes in a short version. So maybe this short version, but it's going to fit like 1 less pot across. So this is going to be 5 across instead of 6 across. 5 times 5 is 25. This is 6 times 6, so this is 36. So this will fit like all of those yogi chips that we just cut. I think I said it was 36 or 37. So that would fill, you know, one of these flats. So you can see why I want to use the smaller pot if it will work. I've been taking my failed graft chips and sticking them in like this, and they've been rooting. A few have died, just dried up, or for other reasons unknown died, but most of them rooted, even though it took a long time. Planting them more upright like this, like vertically or kind of at an angle like this, which is preferable, I think, they rooted much faster. These tips all rooted, they're growing. You can see how fat and pumped up they are. Like, these were really dehydrated and skinny and messed up. And now as soon as they get a root in, though, they just start to plump up and go. So judging how that went, judging how all these tips I rooted went, I think this is going to work really good. So this is what I'm saying. Once these get older, it can be hard to tell. And I didn't write on these Jules chips when I took them which direction was up. So I think that's important, just to save time when you're actually planting them and not having to be like looking at them and stuff. It can be a little difficult to figure out on some cactus, especially if they've been sitting around for a while. Okay, so I want a lot of this green showing, so I'm trying to bury them at a slight angle. So the base is buried a little bit, and part of it's like the back half is buried deeper, but there's still a lot of green showing because the green can continue to photosynthesize and gather energy for the plant to grow. even though it's just sitting there without roots. And so I don't want to bury it too deep, just a little, just barely 1/8 of an inch even, kind of below the surface should be fine. And except for me obsessively checking these to see if they've rooted yet, which is a very likely scenario, you know, I can pretty much just leave these, I think this is up, in place after this and just keep them watered. And I don't water them lightly. I water them, I want them damp constantly. They're much more likely to root and root quicker if they're kept nice and damp. If they're well calloused, they don't seem to rot easily. Before I publish this video, we'll be revisiting those cactus we cut today to see how they're doing. Originally, this experiment started with me splitting cactus, hoping that they would do this, where each rib, once it's split, decides to sprout a pup. And I just thought that maybe the cactus would perceive each rib as its own plant and feel the need to do that. On this plant, it works really well, and I've already harvested a set of pups, and then it pupped out again, and right now we're going to harvest the next set. However, there really isn't any other cactus I did it on where it was very successful like this. One grew like 3 out of 5, I think, and I cut those off, and I think it grew a few back. Not very predictable. And then like on this one, and I think maybe 2 others, they just failed. None of them have pupped. Well, there's one that's finally pupping. This is like a year later, I think. In this case, I'm just going to harvest these and forget that. And this experiment, this part of the experiment is pretty much over. It doesn't really interest me anymore. It's not going that well. I will continue this one, and you know, I'll post updates probably on Instagram and stuff at the very least. But my suspicion is that now that it has pupped out a bunch, there's 3 good pups here, that it's going to put its energy into those and not into repupping these. The reason that this did so well may have been that none of these pups existed at the time, and this was its only choice to either grow these or grow new pups, and since these were the highest points, that's what it did. So in a situation like that, where say here you have only 1 column, maybe it would work. You know, I don't know, but honestly, at this point, it just doesn't seem that promising. I'll keep it in mind. There may be a place where I'll try to use it again, but kind of doubt it. In this case, I'm just going to take this entire pup off. So like this one back here is the other cactus I did that on. And I harvested a set of pups, but it was only maybe 3 out of 6 or something, and only 1 grew back. So again, just scrapping that idea. Doesn't seem to be working that well. And this was one of the better examples. So. Okay, so let's say you would want to produce 1,000 cactus plants. Rate of failure, let's say maybe like 10 or 15% or something like that. So we'll overdo it a bit, and let's just say that we are going to try to produce 1,150 cactus. We're looking at 36, so we divide that by 36, and we need 31 of these flats. Now that sounds like a lot, right? But I want you to contrast that with, say, growing those as cuttings in like a 1-gallon pot, and how much space that's going to take up. If my plan works, and this timing works of like starting this in August, and having these rooted and sprouting pups like this, about maybe something like this by spring, and then growing like maybe up to a 6-inch or 8 or 10-inch pup, depending, you know, if you really were doing like daily water and weekly fertilizing in the right conditions, it may be possible. There's also the possibility to extend some of that indoors too. You're talking about a plant that could be put in the ground in a year. Right? So not in a year, but the following year. So it could be ready to put in the ground in a year. So the next year you put in this like 5 or 6-inch thing with good roots already, take good care of that, and it's going to be like 12, 14 or more inches if you take good care of it at the end of the next year. So again, contrast that with coming up with 1,000, maybe a little more cuttings of like specific clones that, you know, are for some reason desirable. Are there that many cuttings even available? And how big are those cuttings going to be? And then housing those in probably like a 1 gallon pot, something around this size if you're using the Anderson system, which would be wise because it's extremely efficient. These are so square that they don't waste any space. You can really pack them in. Skip this size of pot completely, right? I use this for cuttings, but for this stuff, I'm hoping to get away with more like this. Now, if we had to go to this size, or maybe if we're trying to get them extra big or leaving them longer using this size, same thing, we're looking at 25. So that should be easy to figure out if one was like smart and stuff. But I'm just going to use the calculator and say 44 of these flats right here. They come, the ones I can get locally, they come 25 to a pack, which I'm going to invest in at least one set of those because I love this system. I think it's great. It's a really smart design for professional nursery work by people who clearly are nursery people and know what they're doing. By the way, the most problem I've had with these so far is like these basil cuts where there's a whole bunch of tissue showing. They just seem to dry up. You know, that should be predictably, right? But we'll just see how these go. I think when cutting these, you really want to make sure you're cutting all the way to the bottom, like flat across the whole thing. But it's possible that these actually healed back together. Okay, I think it's about day 3 here. I don't know if you can tell, but these are certainly dehydrated and a little wonky, a little bit sloughed, like a little bit fallen over. With this tallest one, I think, you know, if I had made all these cuts like I did and just left it, it certainly would have, some of these would have fallen over, probably all of them. So the frame that we put inside prevented that. It could also be just prevented with a stake, probably. You know, you could probably apply a couple rubber bands and put in a stake, but then you're like the rubber band like this one is going to close the cuts instead of open them. King Tubby looks good. Same thing. There's floppiness to it. It's pretty tall. I think this probably would have fallen over as well. Looking inside here, there's some discoloration where the wire's touching, but it's very rusty, so that may just be rust. My guess is it will be self-limiting, but we'll see. You know, I didn't even clean this wire. I just threw it in there. This looks good too, but as you can see, it's leaning way over to the side. Again, some of these, if not all of them, probably would have fallen over. On the shorter ones, like these two are cut, and they look great. They're opening up on their own because they're shrinking. This one looks pretty much ideal right here. That's just what we want. This one looks very good too. Even this King Tubby, which is leaning way over to the side, right? But it has no cuts. So if this had these cuts, you know, think it'd be much more likely that it would have collapsed. Okay, here's the second update after cutting. This, you can see the cage inside here is very loose. It's just flopping around in there. There's lots and lots of space. I think this one probably would have collapsed, pretty sure, if it didn't have any support and didn't have like the rubber bands on the top. But it isn't staked, and it is a little better and stiffer than the other ones, but it's also a larger diameter, so that probably helped. So you can see like on here, there's some dark stuff there. That's pretty typical, not uncommon to get that kind of like a little bit of mold growth. I don't see anything on here that's going to be a problem. But you could see how much this one collapsed, and I had to end up staking it up a little bit. If that had not had the cage inside, had not had rubber bands, it would have completely flopped. Those arms would have flopped all over and probably broken. Same with this one here, which is probably like a good full 12 inches long. The cuts themselves, maybe slightly more. This could have partly been prevented by staking it ahead of time, right? I just let it fall over, and then I kind of threw a stake in there to keep it from falling over any further. As far as the ones like this that I did not use the wire cage inside of, they're shorter and they all look great. This one was not cut. If it had been, I would say there's a good chance that one would have fallen over too. If it had the horizontal cuts in it as well, maybe. But those cuts are maybe more like 9.5, 10 inches long. Maybe a limit's going to be like 9 to 10 inches without some kind of support or like the cage inside. And then here's another one. This one though, I either didn't cut it all the way or it healed back together because it's not divided all the way, and I have to get out here today with a knife and finish cutting that. So it's been about 2 weeks. I am tempted to cut some of these now. I've been watering them, so they're quite plump. You know, I don't know if they're still losing any water out of these cuts, but I kind of doubt it. I think I could get away with cutting them now. So what I may do is cut some now and then cut some in 2 weeks. I'll probably do some of each because these do look like they're probably healed enough. The other thing is, like, I've cut quite a few chips now with these cuts, you know, and without them. And if you look at these, like, these don't matter. Like, they're basically healed back up. Either didn't cut them deep enough to bother, but I think they just regrafted themselves back together. So unless those are going to be really opened up, you know, like, you know, bent open somehow and held that way, this doesn't really make that much difference. And I've cut a lot of chips now from ones where there really wasn't any horizontal cut. I mean, like, this is so shallow that it really wouldn't matter. So like when I cut that, it's going to be the equivalent of cutting one that was never had any horizontal cuts in it in the first place. And in general, those look good, you know, so I think we could probably dispense with this entire thing. And that opens up yet another possibility. We probably should be at the chalkboard. If we don't have to worry about making these horizontal cuts and keeping them open, which I'm at this point feeling like that's probably just not necessary, now we could look at putting in something that's a spreader that's going to give us really good air circulation and good support, but be much easier to deal with and actually more effective at opening the interior of the cactus out. And that would be basically just the same kind of spiral concept, except it would just get wider toward the top, just like that. So it would be easy to make a cone mandrel for that, or even just find something laying around. It wouldn't even have to be like a certain length. It could stick out way out the top, no problem. Holding the top together somehow with just a band or something, and then maybe staking it preemptively to make sure that it doesn't fall over. But just a single stake should do it. And that'll achieve all the major objectives if we don't need these horizontal cuts like that. So that will probably actually be the next experiment. And then it will be a matter of producing a bunch of chips like this without those horizontal cuts, rooting them all and see how it goes. And I think it's going to go fine because we could take a look right now at some of the stuff I cut before. So if we look at this batch of yogi chips, I think there were 6 ribs, and either 3 or 4 of those ribs were cut with the horizontal cuts like this along the rib, so that, you know, the idea was that if this was healed open, that I'd only be cutting this little bit right here, right? Just that much, and it's going to lose less moisture, like the chip's going to lose less moisture. But in reality, like, this one didn't have a horizontal cut. It looks fine. It's super plump and nice. This one did. It looks no different, you know, and you can see, like, the part that had healed on the horizontal cut was only about this much. So we still had all that to heal. And if you just look at them in general, I don't really see anything in here that's weird. This one's bent because the rib bent over while it was healing. So I'm pretty sure we can just eliminate that whole notching thing. You know, we want elegant solutions, right? An elegant solution is a simple solution that solves the problem. We don't want to overcomplicate things if we don't have to. And this kind of has devolved into something that is much simpler and much easier. Being able to have a one-size-fits-all of these, you could be like 12 inches long or something, and if you have like an 8-inch cut, it'll just stick out the top and it really doesn't matter. The nature of this will really probably hold these together much more rigidly, and then again with just 1 or 2 bands, a single stake put in preemptively to prevent any kind of collapsing will probably completely solve that problem. It's very simple. I like it. That's probably going to be the next thing.